Yeah, hello, everybody. Welcome to our April community meeting. For today's meeting, we are going to start with community celebrations. We'll get a product roadmap update from Akshat, Senior Product Manager at GX. And finally, Tyler Hoffman, Senior Software Engineer at GX, will give y'all an update and a demo of GX 1.0. So to start with community celebrations, as always, as we begin our meeting, it's important to take a moment to acknowledge the outstanding members of our community, go the extra mile to assist and support their fellow users. Everyone on this list was involved with helping others solve one of their problems they were facing. And I'd like to give special mention to Lori and Toivo, who have demonstrated exceptional dedication in helping others within the community over this past month. So thank you to all y'all. Okay. At this point, I will pass it over to Akshat, who will be giving a product roadmap update.
Hello, good morning, afternoon, and evening to all of you, depending on where you are. My name is Akshat. I'm a senior product manager with GX, and I'm super excited to talk about some of the things that we've delivered and what we're working on. We'll start with what we recently released. So last month, we talked about improving onboarding paths. We've actually made some changes to our onboarding flow for GX Cloud. For those of you who have logged in recently, you might have noticed, especially if you signed up, that we are simplifying the paths so that you're asked to set up a GX agent. And that's the only thing you have to do before we drop you into the rest of the app, which is great because it makes it a lot easier for you to know what you need to do to get the most out of GX Cloud. You don't have to fumble around on your own looking for what the next step is or how to get started using the product. So we're super excited about that. The other change we've made is if you're familiar with using GX Cloud and setting up expectations, you might notice that we had a button for us to collect some metrics about your data asset. And if you didn't load those metrics, you would have to type in column information and other schema information manually when you were configuring an expectation. We have made that much better by automatically loading data asset schemas when you try to create an expectation. When you land on your data asset overview page and you actually try to set something up, you will notice that those column information is now pre-populated, which makes it less likely for you to run into configuration mistakes after the fact. You can just drop down, pick a column, and you don't have to worry about trying to run an expectation later and realizing that you missed that S in users or something else, and suddenly you have to go back and reconfigure. And lastly, we've removed block style data sources. This is actually a change that we made some time ago. What this really is us sunsetting it. For those of you who may not be familiar, the way that we used to configure data sources was more in a block format, where you would have to list out every keyword argument and then the property for each of those arguments in your SDK. We changed that some time ago to be more, I think we were calling fluid, which was more of a function that you pass in to your data source creation. We have removed the remaining elements of the block style data sources. So now there's a much cleaner way to configure data sources, and the old way of defining it in a block style is completely gone. So, we hope this makes for a much better developer experience, and we're super excited about what this can lead to in the future. In terms of coming soon, we talked about this last month. We're continuing to work on bringing more expectations into GX Cloud. We currently have 13, and we're looking to expand that out to about 50. And so we're continuing to work on that. There's no ETA on that yet, but we're actively planning it and actively pursuing it. And so we're super excited to bring that and expand what you can do with GX Cloud, and something that's super critical to what we offer at Great Expectations. And then lastly, for those of you, which I hope is most of you, who are familiar with actions and sending notifications to Slack anytime a validation runs, and especially when it fails, if you've been using GX Cloud, you might notice that there's no real way to create or manage Slack actions in cloud, which is something that we're aware of and something that we're working on fixing. So we're hoping to have that pretty soon, let's say next couple months, if all goes well. And we're looking forward to enabling that for you so that you no longer have to rely on just the library to manage your Slack actions, especially if you're working with folks who may be non-technical and not comfortable using the Python library. they are no longer excluded from managing this themselves or for their team or for your organization. So really excited about what we're working on and what's coming up next. Stay tuned next month. We'll have more. In the meantime, if you do have any feedback for us, please reach out to us at product_feedback@greatexpectations.io. Either me or one of the other PMs will be monitoring that. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk to you. Definitely please share your feedback with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that product roadmap update, Akshat. And then, so now we're going to move on to the GX 1.0 demo with Tyler. As y'all know, there's been a lot of work going on with 1.0. So yeah, very excited to see this latest update. I will stop sharing my screen so that you can go ahead and take it over, Tyler.
Cool. Hey, everybody, I'm Tyler. I'm an engineer here at Great Expectations. I've been here since, I think, March of last year. And for the last few months, I've been working on the team that's working on getting 1.0 ready. So give me just a second while I fumble with screen share. And then we can dive in. Can I get some thumbs up if folks can see Visual Studio Code? Cool, thank you. Great. So let's see. There's a couple things that we want to show off today about 1.0. We want to highlight some of the cleaned up, the more clear, simplified API that we're bringing. We want to show some of the more clear data modeling that we have, as well as some of the better IDE support throughout some of the flows. A few things to keep in mind during this demonstration. There are still some things that are moving targets with 1.0. This isn't ready to be put into production yet. Some things are subject to change, import paths. A couple of the arguments are probably going to be changing to some of these methods and constructors, but we would absolutely love if you folks can pull down the latest pre-release, play around with it, give us some feedback. So today I have a repository that we're going to be playing around with. This has a number of notebooks. You're free to pull this repository, play around with it yourself. And this is pointed at the pre-release that we caught just yesterday. So this is 1.0.0A2. It's available at PyPy. So yeah, please check it out. So jumping into the repository itself, let's see, we have a small getting started guide. I think that the first two options here are technically optional about creating a virtual environment, but I recommend it. Over here, let me switch to the preview. That's probably a little prettier. We have a requirements.txt that you should install. This is pretty loose on all of the requirements except for Great Expectations. It does tie it to that latest pre-release so that you're on exactly what I'm using here. And this comes with a Docker image that contains a Postgres database that's pre-populated with data. So you don't have to worry about spinning up data locally or any of that. You should just be able to load this repository. We have one little script that will run, and then you're kind of off to the races. So I'm going to run that script really quick to start our Postgres container. And so you'll find in the scripts directory, you have a run dockerized PG. I'm going to run that. And really quickly spins up my image locally. If you're running it for the first time, you're going to see it take a little bit longer while it downloads the image since that contains all the data. You shouldn't have to use the other script, but if you want, you can poke around the database directly. This connects you to it. You can do things like describe the tables in there. This has yellow trip data table. If you've played around with any of our other quick starts, probably the name of the table is familiar. You can describe it. And it has a couple columns that we're going to be referencing later on, things like passenger count, drop-off time, things like that. But I'm not going to spend too much time actually in the database because we're going to be interacting with it through Great Expectations 1.0 for the rest of this. All right, so let's hop in. The first workflow that we want to highlight is how you author expectations and expectation suites in 1.0. So I want to really quickly give a refresher on what this looks like in older versions of Great Expectations. So let's see. Folks can still see my screen when I switch workspaces. Give them some nods. Great. So the old flow with creating expectation suites, at least interactively, was that you would get your data source, you'd get your asset, and then you'd create this validator object that wraps your expectation suite. And you would call various expectations on that validator. And one of the big pieces of feedback that we got on this was that the side effects can't be predicted at the time that you actually write code like this. So you write validator.expect columns to be not null or whatever your expectation is. And the side effect of whether or not that expectation is added to your suite is based on if that expectation passes or if it fails. So not predictable, not entirely clear to folks what was happening under the hood and led to some confusion. That's one of the big things that we want to address in 1.0 is we want to make things very clear. We want to make the people writing the code empowered to know that either they are validating data or they're adding it to expectations, and just make those things really clear. Additionally, if you were to be typing this code in your editor, you'd find that you don't have things like autocomplete, you don't have type safety or any of that on the arguments that you're passing into these expectations. So that's sort of the state of things with 0.18. In 1.0, all of that is going to get a lot nicer. So we're going to go through a couple of boilerplatey cells in this notebook here, and then we'll get to the cool stuff. So the first thing is we have a bunch of stuff to import. This is going to get simplified as we get closer to a stable release. But for the time being, we have a number of models that we're importing. You will see in our documentation going forward, we're using this convention on line 3 of importing all of our expectations as GXE. So this is sort of a namespace under which all the expectations live. And unlike previous versions of Great Expectations, now you're going to directly instantiate expectations. So you're going to call a constructor like any other constructor, and you'll get all the autocomplete and IntelliSense and type checking that you would hope to get from that. I also want to call out this one other piece that we're importing. We have a constants file here. You don't need to dwell on any of the values. We have 2 strings here just for connecting to the local database, and the rest is a bunch of string literal constants, just so that we have consistent like data source name and asset name throughout the rest of these notebooks. So cool. We have everything imported that we need to import. The next thing that we want to do is connect to some of our data. You'll also see this in a few of the notebooks here. There's these try except blocks. We just have try except so that you can run the notebooks multiple times. You don't need to worry about what's in the except. The try is where the interesting stuff is happening. So we grab a context. In this case, we're using a file back to context for all the notebooks here. We're going to create a data source the same as you would in 0.18. In this case, Postgres, pass in a name, pass in a connection string. We'll add a table asset on that, passing in a name and passing in a table name. This is the same as what we just saw when we looked inside Postgres. And then we get to a new concept in GX 1.0. So this is what's called a batch definition. So a batch definition is new, and it's meant to make things more clear in terms of what is the asset versus what data are we pointing to. So for an asset, you can create one or more batch definitions, and these specify, in this case, we're going to point to the entire table. When we get to the third demo here, we're going to look at some variations on these batch definitions so we can just isolate subsets of data. But for the time being, we're doing sort of the simple thing. We're pointing to all the data. So I'm going to run this, and we're going to have all of our models that we care about. And we can jump down into actually creating an expectation. So the flow here that I want to simulate is we have some data, and we're trying to write expectations interactively. And so we're going to go ahead and make some. We're going to test, does it work against data? So like we said earlier, we have this GXE namespace, and within it, we have all of our expectation classes. We have autocomplete, we have all of the like niceties that you would expect from your IDE now because of this, and we can instantiate this. So here we're using expect column min to be between, and I'm saying we expect that minimum to be between 4 and 5. And then we can actually just go ahead and validate that against the batch of data that our batch definition points to. So I'm going to run this code, and we'll see our output is that this was not successful. The reason is because our observed value was 1.0. So we could save this to an expectation suite if we still like it, or we can go ahead and add it our expectation. And that's what I'm going to do now. So if we hop down to the next cell, we have a handle on that expectation, and any of the properties on there, we can directly edit. So we can just say min value equals 0, and then we can again call batch.validate, passing in that expectation. We'll see that it passes this time. So we have a good working expectation, works against our data. So we're happy. The next thing that we want to do is probably create an expectation and add, or an expectation suite and add our expectation to it. So step 1 here is we're going to create our suite. Line 2 here introduces a slightly new API around collections of suites. You'll see that we have here context.suites.add, and we pass in an actual instance of a suite. This is a pattern that is based on what we were doing with sources in older versions of Great Expectations. And now we're trying to roll that out a little bit more broadly for a consistent API. We have this around suites, checkpoints, and another concept validation definitions that we'll look at shortly here. Yeah, so we've created our suite, we've added it to our context, and we have a handle on it here. So we're just going to call suite.addExpectation, passing in the expectation that we made previously. And then I'm just going to add one more just for the heck of it. We're going to pass in, we're going to expect values to be between 0 and 4. So we're going to run that. At this point, we have expectations should be persisted. Again, this is file system, so we can go in and inspect. We have committed to file JSON that's almost the same shape as it was in previous versions of expectations, where we have these configurations enumerated here. You'll see both the expectations that we created in Python. And then we might want to ask ourselves, okay, so we created this expectation suite. One of these expectations I just sort of created inline without validating. Is this suite going to work against our data? And so we can use the same API that we used before of batch.validate. We can pass in our suite and we can get our results back. This time we fail, and it shows that we have 2 results. One is our first expectation that we assumed would pass. That passed. The second one, success is false. And so what we can do is we can go and edit that second expectation. Right now, this is kind of up to the user to pull out expectations how they see fit. Suites have a list of expectations. You can pull out expectations by index. You can look through them based on different fields. Here, I'm just searching for the first expectation that is of type expect column values to be between. We can go in, we can set the property directly on it. Here, I'm setting it to 6. I should go back and show the reason that I'm doing that. Our partial unexpected list above showed some 5s and some 6s. So we're going to take that and trust that the maximum value is now going to be 6. We'll run this again with batch.validate, and we'll see, hooray, we got success. We have an expectation suite that works against our batch of data. The final thing to do here, because we were directly modifying some of those properties, is we're just going to go ahead and save our expectation. And we've got 2 options here. Our models in 1.0 have this save method on them. We can call save on our expectation itself, or we can call save on the suite, and that's going to save sort of everything in that tree of data. So it's going to save all the properties of the expectations nested within a suite. So I will do that. And we can see that it's going to be persisted. The new max value is 6 here in the JSON. All right, so that is authoring expectations in GX 1.0. I'm going to take a quick break here and turn things over if folks have questions or comments, and then we can jump to the next one. Is there anything in the comments that I should be looking at?
Nothing right now.
Okay, excellent, thanks. Molly, do you want to just call it out if there is something that I should pause on?
Yeah, sure. Can do.
Sweet, thank you. Awesome. So let's jump over to our second demo here. So this is going to be looking at validation definitions and checkpoints. If I didn't say this earlier, there is an ordering that you're supposed to use with these notebooks. So if you are playing around with it, make sure that you've run the first notebook before you run this one. So let's see, two things to be aware of on this: validation definitions. This is a new model within Great Expectations. It's meant to be dramatically more simple and clear in terms of how you bind data to the expectations around that data. And our checkpoints or our checkpoint class has been totally rewritten. You'll kind of see some evidence of that here. Right now we're importing from V1 checkpoint. That'll get changed around, but we've really simplified the API here. There's a lot less room for making mistakes, unnecessary overrides, things like that. But we'll go ahead, we'll import everything we're going to import. We're going to load all of the data that we created in the previous notebook, our data source, our asset, the suite that we created, again, highlighting that context.suites collection. And then we're going to pull out our batch definition. This line is it's most likely going to change before we go stable with 1.0. Right now, you've got to iterate through your batch definitions and pull out the one that you want. We have plans to implement in data asset.get batch definition by name method. But for the time being, this is how you can pull out that batch definition that we created, again, pointing to the whole table. All right. So validation definitions. This is, like I said, a new class in GX 1.0. It's an explicit way to tie data via the batch definition to the expectations on the data. These are pretty central to how we think about checkpoints in 1.0. And so what we do with them is we're going to instantiate this, pass in a name, pass in our batch definition, pass in our suite, and then we can run this. And the result here isn't going to be terribly interesting. It's the same as the previous batch.validate that we saw in the last notebook. But what's nice here is that we can start running this within a checkpoint. So checkpoints are going to take in a list of validation definitions. Here I'm passing in the one that we just created, as well as another one in line just to show that we can do that. And then we're also going to pass in a list of actions. In this case, the only action that I'm passing in is an update data docs action. So this checkpoint, when we run this code, it uses that context.checkpoints collection. It will persist, and we'll be able to look that up on disk if we're interested in doing it. Once we have that checkpoint, we can run it. And because of the update data docs action, we can then call context.open data docs. So I'm going to run this whole thing. And cool, it opens up and it shows us our data docs. Here's all of our validation results that we have. Right now, it's just one. I will, for the sake of showing this, we can rerun it again. It's going to open our data docs again. And now we have the history. We've run our checkpoint twice, so we can see both of those. All right. So that is validation definitions and checkpoints. I'm going to give a little break here and check the chat if there's anything I should be looking at. Let's see.
Oh yeah, looks like one just came in.
Okay. How do you add additional information to expectations? For example, the explanation of what the regex is validating. This came up when someone was reviewing the overview results page and got lost understanding what the regex was validating. Is the goal here for sort of annotating the expectation that you're instantiating, or do you mind expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, I can come off mute. Yes. So it would be basically that. For example, I think you had just shown it right above your code here. When they are reviewing it might not appear anymore, but you're reviewing the results page and it showed you like the expectation and the results and yeah, this page. And the status. Sometimes in the expectation, in the regex, it just shows what the regex is, but it doesn't give you an example of like what it was supposed to validate. and I tried adding like a metadata, but that wasn't appearing within the results page. So I was just kind of curious if that was something that can be added, or if that has to be like a new expectation that needs to be created.
Let's see, we do, James, jump in if I'm misremembering this. I think that we now have a top level notes in expectations that can be passed in. I don't believe that they're yet wired to show up on the validation results page though. So I think that might need to be something that we.
Yeah, we can double check that wiring, but Luis, even in 018, you mentioned that you were putting some data into Meta. So that was an example where in the older API, it was still possible to provide those annotations. There was a notes field inside the Meta dictionary. There's some documentation online that we can get for you so that you can provide that, and then it'll show up in the rendered data documentation. In 1.0, like Tyler was saying, it's much clearer. Meta is reserved exclusively for use of the users. There's nothing that GX will do or touch inside 1.0, and that leaves it to be it's kind of an area of, from GX's perspective, still untyped information, whereas notes is now a string that is available to provide these kind of exactly annotations that you're talking about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I look forward to that presentation then. Thank you.
Cool. And then I think we have one more question here. Is it possible to fix asset name field issue? Yes, none in the data docs, please. Yeah, that seems like something we should fix. That seems like just a bug that's missing here. Yeah, I'm just going to take that as a to-do that we should clean that up. Cool. And thanks, Bill. Looks like you shared some follow-up on the previous question. If folks are cool with it, I think I'm going to move on to the last workflow that we want to highlight here, and then happy to circle back on any questions. So this final flow, this is specifying data with batch definitions. So we said in the first demo that we're creating that whole table batch definition. This is where we're going to circle back and sort of refine our batch definitions to point to just a subset of data, or configure how we sort of slice that data up. This is, if you think back to older versions of Great Expectations, you have maybe seen splitters and sorters. These could be used on, say, like a SQL asset to cut up your data by, say, like just yearly or monthly or daily. We also had, for file assets, you could specify a batching regex, which would sort of split up so that you could have one batch per file, essentially. We've sort of reworked those APIs to collapse them a little bit to remove some of the ambiguity about how that sorting works and how that splitting works. And so we will walk through that here. Again, a couple things to import. We're going to pull out data source, asset, and suite from our context. And then we're going to jump in and actually define these more specific batch definitions. In this case, I'm creating two, and they're both batch definitions that are monthly batch definitions. So the way that this works is you pass in a name, you pass in the column that you want to use for this, where the month is going to be found. And then there's an optional field called sort ascending. Defaults to true, so the first one, this batch definition, is going to be ascending. The second one is descending. And so one of the key workflows that we want to support here is, say you just want to split all of your data by month, and then you just want to be running your expectations against that most recent month. That's essentially the use case that we want to support with this one. And if there were a reason that you need to do that in reverse, you got your sort ascending as false. So we can run this. And then what we're going to do is create a validation definition. We're going to pass in our batch definition and our suite, just like we did before. And then we can run the validation definition. And we'll look a little bit deeper in here, and we can see the batch ID. And so this is the name of the asset. And then you can see that we're specifically using the batch for 2022, February. All the data in our database, it ranges from January 19 to February 22. So this is the most recent month that we have in our database. We can also run this a different way. We can run it with, hold on just a second. My editor is having some issues. Okay. We'll run it with descending data, and we'll see that we got that first month. Now, in some cases, you want to specify which batch it is that you're going to be using. And to do that, we can specify a month and we can specify a year. And that's what we see in this final example. We've got batch or validation definition.run, and we pass an explicit batch parameters. In this case, we're passing the dictionary containing the month and the year of 2020, and it looks like that's May. We can run that, and we can see that it runs specifically on May of, this is 2019. That shouldn't have happened. So got to the last cell and the demo gods.
Looks like the batch parameters dict has 2 values of month.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, so we run that again and we get what we would expect. We were actually just talking about this yesterday, the need to tighten this up so that you require both year and month. So that's something that's going to be coming. Cool, so that's using batch definitions and specifying specific batches with the batch parameters. That is everything that I have to demo. I'm going to turn things over to questions again if folks have them.
Yeah, so it looks like one came in a moment ago. Is there any fix on the performance issue when the unexpected result list is huge in Spark-based processing, like putting a limit on the number of entries getting returned in the result?
Oh,
Oh,
I just saw a bug in our internal ticketing system yesterday about this that someone was starting to work on. So I think that I think this is coming. I can't promise it, but I was just perusing the internal bug list and this was on there.
are there any other questions about what Tyler just presented? I'm going to give it a moment to see. Give folks a chance. Okay.
cool. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to you, I guess, Molly.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. It was really cool to see all these updates coming along. Yeah. Very cool. Okay, I will share my screen again. All right, I just made this slide while you were talking. This was posted in the chat, but this is just a reminder that you can go ahead and install the pre-release if you like. Okay. So now I'm just kind of like on to some kind of closing announcements at this point. Flagging that we have a current opening at Great Expectations for the senior, sorry, I lost myself on the screen. I'm making sure I had the right slide up. That we have an open role for senior developer advocate. If you are a fan of GX and would like the opportunity to shape the developer experience and community for data practitioners, then it'd be worth applying. Okay, yeah, a few other announcements I have for you, is if you haven't tried Cloud yet, then you can do so for free. You just need to go to app.greatexpectations.io to give it a go. Additionally, speaking of getting started with Cloud, we are currently holding workshops to help folks get started with GX Cloud, focused on either getting started with Postgres or with Snowflake. The next workshop is tomorrow, April 17th, and is focused on getting started with Snowflake. And then there's more workshops that are going to be added soon. So if you can't make that one, or you're more interested in the Postgres one, you can also ask to be added to the wait list, and you'll be notified when more workshops are available. This is also just a reminder that we really want your feedback. So if you sign up for Cloud and have feedback, or if you are using the pre-release of 1.0, please reach out to us anytime and let us know let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear it. This is just a reminder to keep if you want to keep your calendar up to date with future community events, make sure to follow the GX community calendar by going to greatexpectations.io/meetup and clicking the follow calendar button. And we love highlighting community members at these community meetups. So if you have any ideas of something you could present, or you have recent content that you put out there relating to GX that you want us to highlight, reach out to me on Discourse or Slack, Molly Pettit, and I will help get things moving to help you be able to present at the meeting if that makes sense. Yeah, that's everything we had. So this is, thank you for joining our community event. And I'm gonna just see if there's any last questions about that came in late from Tyler's. Let's see. Someone asked, how can we access the recorded session? If you're talking about this meeting, this will be posted with the community roundup later this week. So that'll be coming, and we will post that in announcements. Great, and I think that's everything. So
Thank you, Molly.
thank you all for coming.
Thanks
Have a
all.
good rest of your week.